it's all pre-taped.
Hello, I'm Diane Kresh, Director of Arlington Public Library, and we're here for another conversation live from Diane's living room, except we're not live, but we are local. So my guest today is Carol Stricker, who is a former US diplomat and has written a book called Bombs, Bullets, and the Tank at the Office, Protecting America on Diplomacy's Front Lines. So we're interested today in a very interesting conversation given the times we're living in. Carol Stricker, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you for having me. And up front, I have to say thank you for all that you do. Part of my book is about defending democracy and diplomacy, but even on the home front, what we Americans can do to have a better community. And I really appreciate what Arlington Library, Central Library, is doing with your programs, particularly during the pandemic, to get the community engaged, to get them educated, to help make a better world. So kudos to you too for supporting diplomacy and democracy, even if it's not overseas.
Sure. No, I appreciate it. Thank you. I will pass along the kind words to my staff. Let's start. I want to hear a little bit about you first, because you've written this wonderful book and we will have it available in the library. But tell me a little bit about what drew you to diplomacy and a life in foreign service.
Okay, well, growing up, one of my first memories was actually at the funeral of John F. Kennedy.
Oh.
I was about 5 years old then, and TV was a new technology. And I remember the solemnity and the pomp and the ceremony. And as I grew older, I learned more about him, and I was particularly impressed with his comment, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And I grew up in a small town in Ohio, North Canton, Ohio. Viewers may know the Canton Football Hall of Fame, but it was a small town, traditional, conservative. People didn't travel very much. Mm-hmm. And the women I knew, I have to admit, they were homemakers, a few were teachers. People didn't travel. People certainly didn't travel abroad, but I was fortunate in that I had a family that supported me. And I personally was a bit adventurous. I loved reading. I loved reading about different cultures. And my parents took 6 kids, age 6 to 16, on a fabulous trip in a motorhome across the United States.
Oh, cool.
And getting to New Mexico, for example, and seeing the different culture, hearing the different languages, I'm like, oh, this is way cool. I want more of this. I want to learn about this. And then in high school, they supported me. I was an exchange student to Brazil. In college, I spent a semester on a work-study program in Germany and a semester in France. And again, continuously, I wanted to make the world a better place. I'm a child of the Cold War. We were the good guys, and we had a reputation in the world that people admired and wanted to emulate. And I wanted to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. So
did you actually go and major like poli-sci or government or something like that in college? Did you go to a school of foreign service? Did you just start out and learn, by going up the ranks to the higher levels of diplomacy? I mean, what was the arc of the career?
Okay, that is an excellent question. In fact, I started out pre-med because I was going to save the world a person at a time. But through volunteer work in a hospital, I realized I was too traumatized by people who were very ill and dying. So looking at my background and the expertise I had, I went to Miami of Ohio. It's a liberal arts college in Ohio,
Right.
and I just graduated with a degree in French and German because that's what I had enough credits for to graduate at this time. And I decided, well, maybe I can make a difference in the world in another way. And the beauty of the Foreign Service, it doesn't depend on how much money you have or who you know. You take the test. And it's a rigorous test. It covers everything from world history, geography, politics, to American history, politics, culture, because we're representing America overseas, as well as presenting overseas to American audiences.
Right.
And the test included role playing, where they look at your analytical skills. They figure out, can you exercise good judgment? Can you deal with any craziness?
Yeah.
The test is rigorous. Not a whole lot of people pass it. But if you have been robbed overseas, or if you're an American business that wants to do business overseas and you look to the embassy to help you, you can be pretty darn sure that the diplomats on the front line are going to be able to help you, and they're going to be pretty darn good.
So what was your first posting like?
My first posting was in Africa. And remember, this was 30 years ago. And Bamako, Mali the people were delightful. And I'm going to turn it back to the impact of the home front on diplomacy, because at that time, Mayor Barry was the mayor in Washington, D.C. And my African staff, they're like, oh my gosh, is it really true? Do you have a Black man who's the mayor of the capital of the United States? And, we got so much good, just good everything, good feeling. People helped us in our on American strategic goals. We had foreigners helping us meet those goals because they believed in our ideals and they believed in what we stood for as a country. And, this was also a bit during the Cold War. So again, they saw that Americans were prosperous. We were free from fear of, the authorities coming in and pulling us out of our homes because we, spoke against the government or something. So we gained so much goodwill. That said, there were 2 flights out from Bamako a week. And it was before the age of the internet. So I missed so many treasured family moments. I remember a phone call to my mom for her birthday. It was about $8 a minute.
Oh gosh.
30 years ago was a bit of money. So that didn't happen often. And I remember too, the telephone exchange blew up one day. Lack of maintenance, it wasn't a terrorist thing, but the French, after a week or so, flew in some new equipment, got it up and running again. And our ambassador called into Washington and he said, hey, we're, sorry we've been out of touch, but we're back in contact now, and here's what's been happening. And Washington just is like, we didn't even know you were gone.
Oh my gosh.
So totally isolated. And even today, there may be different challenges for the diplomats of today, but isolation, missing family events, the pandemic, would you rather be facing that here in Virginia, in Arlington, with good hospitals, or overseas? So, but yeah, it was a wonderful tour. And I had great mentors there. So it helped me learn, and some of the lessons, I was in charge of the motor pool and the warehouse men and the mechanics and the whole administrative side of the embassy. So there were 100 men in a patriarchal society, and I had to get them to, I had to show them respect, which I did. And I had to listen to them and get them to listen to me. So it was good training as I rose up the ranks, to, with a tougher audience, to still get people to listen and to buy into American ideals and programs, and again, to make things better. That was the whole point of my career.
Right. So I want to pick up a little bit more on that. You had the French and German background, so the French certainly came in handy. But what other kinds of sort of personal characteristics or aspects of your growing up or your view of the world, what were the traits that you have as a person that enabled you to do this kind of work and feel like you were indeed able to make the world better and make a difference?
Curiosity and respect for everyone.
Okay.
I mean, to me, this discrimination and treating people badly because of race or religion, it makes your country poorer, because instead of utilizing the talents of people, and everybody has talents, you're dissing a good portion of the population.
Sure.
And I remember, I think it was when Secretary Clinton was in Saudi Arabia, and one of their leaders, their high-level officials, said, "We have money, we have oil. Why aren't we, a first world country? What do we need to do?" And she just looked at him and she said, "Half of your population, the female portion of your population, you're not utilizing them. You're keeping them at home, you're keeping them from jobs, and you're basically putting some of the best minds of your generation in a box."
Right.
So I think that was extraordinarily helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't talk enough about how language was such an asset. The Department of State actually sent me to language training for 8 months. I had a bit of Russian,
Mm-hmm.
which is similar to Ukrainian. And they basically had me train in Ukrainian to go out to the newly independent country of Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And people in Ukrainians who spoke Ukrainian, they could have been beaten as far back as under the czars. They could be exiled to Siberia. They could be killed for using their own language. And they were proud of their own language and their own culture. So when they found out that I had been trained by the US government at great expense and for 8 months to learn their language, oh my gosh, did it open doors, and it made my work so much easier. Mm-hmm. And Ukraine was a new country. There were certainly challenges. There was radioactivity because we were so close to Chernobyl. But it was one of my most worthwhile tours. I'm so proud that one of the things I helped do in Ukraine was get rid of several thousands of nuclear missiles and warheads that had been historically aimed at the United States.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah, we had the Clinton visit. President Clinton visited in January of '94. He signed the trilateral agreement where Russia agreed to not interfere in Ukrainian affairs, and US said, well, we'll make sure this agreement holds. And Ukraine signed off, and within a couple of months, I had signed off on a check for like 1.2 million, which was big bucks in that. It's still,
yeah.
And it bought the concrete to fill in the missile silos and to build the housing for demobilized troops. So, an incredible accomplishment
Mhm.
despite, serious hardships and challenges.
So let's talk about the book. You've written a book, Bombs, Bullets, and the Tank at the Office, Protecting America on Diplomacy's Front Lines. And a nice picture of you on the front too.
Thank you.
So the backstory, what was the impetus for the book?
Okay. Served 25 plus years overseas in countries where corruption, weak institutions, bad leadership, terrorism, other issues made life tough for the citizens of these countries. Then I came back home and I'm like, oh my gosh, we have similar concerns. And I've been particularly dismayed over the past couple of years to see diplomacy and to see democracy under attack.
Mm-hmm.
So my book is basically a defense of democracy and its institutions, particularly diplomacy. And it's basically three parts. The first part is just one chapter, which talks about diplomacy, truth, false, or urban myth. And it kind of tests readers, do you know this stuff that you really should know? These are people going into harm's way to protect you. Here's what we do. Here's why it's important. The second part is about my career, a lot of the craziness that happened. I talked about Ukraine, and I should mention that, and this is in the book, it was a construction site. And my first day at the office, I need a restroom break, and I'm looking across, I'm in a trailer. I'm in a construction trailer with 4 other people, not really well insulated, so winters were tough. But my first day at the office, I needed to go to the restroom. Mm-hmm. And there are porta potties like across a sea of mud. Oh. So we had cleared American guards who were overseeing the building to make sure the building wasn't bugged. You've probably heard of the Moscow fiasco, where our embassy, the people who were building it were building in bugs so they could listen to diplomatic conversations. So one of the cleared American guards, he's very sharp. He's looking at me, looking at the restrooms, the porta potties, and he comes over. He's like, "Do you need a lift?" And I'm like, well. So he swept me off my feet and he carried me off to the porta potties and carried me back. And the next day I had my trusty hiking boots to wear to the office. But so, I mean, it was crazy. But again, it was, a wonderful experience and a lot of accomplishments. So that's the whole middle part of the book. But then getting back to my initial remarks, the last chapter is, look, diplomacy is being civil, it's negotiating, it's talking to people who are different from you and coming to agreement on things that you can both agree on to make the world a better place. Right. So I talk about what Americans can do here on the home front. And I hope I give them ideas so they can take action, to make our world better and to make us once again, the shining city on a hill, the example that so many people appreciated and loved, even if they were foreigners. Mm-hmm. They supported us and our ideals because it was the right thing to do.
So let's pause there for a second. What give us 2 or 3 tips. What kinds of things could I do as ordinary citizen of Arlington to make a difference? Yes, I mean, quite apart from my job as the librarian, if I weren't involved in public service, what kinds of advice or suggestions might you make to me?
Okay, let's start with a really simple one. How about become an informed voter?
Great.
Okay, I was appalled at the past presidential election where only about half of Americans voted, and that's about average for an American presidential election. about 50% vote. And then if you think about it, former President Trump did not win the popular vote.
Right.
So less than a quarter of the people in America elected our president. So in 2020, I was very pleased to see the numbers who voted around 66, 67%. And remember, I've served in countries where people have, they've waited hours in line under the blazing sun. They've been beaten for trying to vote. They've been murdered for trying, to execute their simple right to vote as, a citizen of that country. So when I've seen how few people vote in America and how uninformed they are, it just makes me want to cry, because we have the material. You can go to your librarian and get stuff. I did some work with the League of Women's Voters, who they're very, they support both sides. They would support you if you're a Martian. If you were eligible to vote, they're going to help you vote, and they're going to get you the information you need to be to vote wisely. And that, the 50% is only in presidential elections,
right?
Local elections, which are addressing such critical issues like fair housing, where the money in the budget is going to go. Is it going to go to the elderly? Is it going to go to the schools? How is it going to go to the schools? And, the portion of Americans who vote in local elections it's pitiful. Right. It's really sad. And I'm sorry, but my mantra, if you don't vote, you can't complain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So young people, what would be some of your, not advice necessarily, but to get them involved in repairing the stature of the US in the world? Because obviously it isn't going to be just, well, one president came in and did this and another comes in and does that. It's a long period of change, and not necessarily in a good direction. So if we wanted to begin to reverse those trends and improve our standing in the world, young people, to me, would be key to that. So how do we get young people interested in a career in foreign service or diplomacy, or even something like the Peace Corps?
Mm-hmm. Or even something like being active on the home front. Mm-hmm. And I would say two things. First off, patience. And I freely admit I'm not the most patient person on the planet, but things don't happen overnight. If you think back to women's right to vote, mm-hmm. there was a good series on PBS about, I think it's been 2 months now, and it talked about some of the women who fought for the right to vote. Oh yeah, we've been working on this for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. I'm not saying things should take that long, but a little bit of patience, which is not inherently a trait that you find in youth and that you find in America. We're a hustling nation. We want action now. We want change now. So a little bit of patience, but that said, get involved. Mm-hmm. Get involved. You don't have to get involved in everything, but pick a passion, pick something that really interests you, and then go with it. Mm-hmm. Whether it's cleaning up the Chesapeake, and there are a lot of younger people who are interested particularly in the environment, in clean energy. So, pick what you're interested in and stick with it.
So I want to ask you kind of a final question. You're retired, so you're not, I guess, actively representing the United States abroad anymore, right? So, or more or less.
But I think as an American, I will always try to be not the ugly American, but a good representative of the United States.
No, I appreciate the distinction. Thank you. But I was thinking more of, what do you miss about the life of diplomacy and working on behalf of the United States in such, and frankly, such a visible way and such an impactful way?
I'm actually very fortunate to be here in Arlington. And for example, I'm teaching English as a second language. So I have an Afghani, I've had an Iraqi, I've had students from all over the world. So that I love the different culture, and you can get a flavor for that. You can get the meals in Arlington. It's like the whole world, it's like living in a mini UN.
Sure.
So that's what I enjoyed most, the diversity of people, the diversities of cultures. And you have, I mean, yes, the pandemic has put a stop to much of this, but there are beautiful cultural events. And even, I mean, Arlington Library, you've had, I think it was Chinese drumming, you've had, you know, you can get your flavors of abroad, and you don't have to worry about getting the shots to go overseas, or the 16-hour plane trip, or dealing with, you know, the different currency and the language barriers. So I don't really miss that much. And I'm still trying to make a difference, and I'm trying to find out the best way to make a difference. So I've given talks, including like at George Mason University, where I graduated from a master's program after my Miami of Oxford, Ohio undergraduate, trying to get a new generation of diplomats started. I'm still active in volunteer organizations at the Department of State. And I've also given some talks on the material from the book, including like at Aurora Hills and in various venues outside of Arlington, because it's so easy now to do things by Zoom.
Oh, sure.
But I figured, you know, I wrote the book because I just felt I wasn't doing enough, and I'm impatient, and I want everything fixed in America right now. And so
Right.
I thought, if I do the book, I'll reach a broader audience. And so I'm sending it to various libraries, I'm sending it to think tanks, to universities that that do have the foreign affairs core of study, program of study. And I'm hoping, because the book is kind of like a day in the life of a diplomat.
Right.
And I hope it'll let people know the challenges, so they won't be quite so surprised as I might have been, but also the incredible rewards. So I guess short answer to your question, I don't miss much, but I'm working hard to make sure I'm still making a difference and still contributing to my community, and still trying to make this community and America a better place.
Well, that's a great note to end on. I mean, you're still actively engaged. You're still caring about making a difference in the world. Your book, again, is Bombs, Bullets, and the Tank at the Office, Protecting America on Diplomacy's Front Lines. Carol Stricker, it's been a pleasure having you on the program this afternoon. We look forward to sharing the book with readers and patrons throughout Arlington, and to connecting again to hear more stories from your career and the career of others who have gone into public service. So thank you for being with us this afternoon, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure, and keep on doing the good work that you do.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Good night.